Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
We're grateful you've chosen to join us today. Tell us, which part of the world are you watching from? Big city? Small town? Country? We'd love to know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Silent Observer. Russ Donovan wasn't a man who showed his emotions easily. 15 years of special operations training had taught him the value of patience and observation. He stood in the corner of his spacious living room, watching as his wife Victoria flitted from guest to guest at their son Leo's 12th birthday party. She was wearing a designer dress that cost more than what most people made in a week, another unnecessary expense that was straining their finances. The house they lived in was unnecessarily large, in an upscale neighborhood called Oakwood Heights that Victoria had insisted upon. Russell had wanted something more modest, something they could truly afford, but Victoria had been adamant. "Appearances matter, Russ," she'd said. Russell had acquiesced, not because he was weak, but because he chose his battles carefully. Russell sipped his whiskey, observing the dynamics of the room. Victoria was laughing too loudly at something Nathaniel Henderson had said. Henderson, their neighbor and local real estate magnate, had his hand placed just a little too low on Victoria's back. Most people wouldn't notice, but Russell did. He always noticed. "Dad, can we cut the cake now?" Leo appeared at his side, eyes bright with excitement despite the tension that had been building in the house for months. Russell smiled down at his son, the only person who could break through his stoic exterior. "Sure thing, buddy. Let's get your mom's attention." As they moved toward Victoria, Russell caught a glimpse of his reflection in the hall mirror. At 42, he was still fit and strong, his dark hair showing just touches of silver at the temples. His face remained impassive as always, betraying none of the calculations happening behind his gray eyes. "Victoria," he called, his voice quiet but commanding, cutting through the chatter. "Leo wants to cut his cake." Victoria turned, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Of course." Everyone gathered around. As Leo blew out his candles, Russell studied the guests. There was Sam Westfield, his best friend from their military days, now a contractor like Russell. Marina Reeves, his old unit's JAG officer turned civilian attorney, who still respected Russell enough to make time for his son's birthday despite her busy schedule. And then there was Bennett Hargrove, Victoria's father, once wealthy until gambling had stripped him of everything. The old man now lived on their charity, or rather, Russell's hard-earned money. The cake was served, and Russell moved through the crowd, exchanging pleasantries but saying little. He learned long ago that people revealed more when you let them talk, and people had been revealing quite a bit lately. Later, as guests began to leave, Russell overheard Bennett talking to Victoria in the kitchen. "You could have done so much better than him, Tori," Bennett muttered, not realizing Russell was within earshot. "A man like Henderson could give you the life you deserve." "Daddy, please," Victoria hissed. "Not now." Russell walked away silently, storing the information away like he had been doing for months. Pieces of a puzzle that was slowly taking shape. That night, after Leo had gone to bed, Russell sat in his home office reviewing financial statements. Victoria had been spending more and more, driving them into debt despite his considerable income. When he confronted her about it, she just shrugged. "We need to maintain our lifestyle, Russ. What would people think if we started cutting back?" "They'd think we were being responsible," he replied evenly. Victoria laughed dismissively. "That's your problem. You've never understood how the real world works. Not everyone can hide behind a wall of silence like you do." Russell said nothing, but he made a mental note to check their joint account again in the morning. Something wasn't adding up, and Russell Donovan had built a career on noticing when things didn't add up. Chapter 2. The Growing Distance. The first signs of serious trouble had appeared 6 months earlier, when Russell returned from a 2-week security consultation job in Dubai. Victoria had been different, distant, distracted, checking her phone constantly. When he asked about it, she'd snapped at him. "Not everything is a security threat that needs analyzing, Russell. Maybe if you spent more time here instead of halfway around the world, you'd know what was going on in your own house." Russell had let it go, but he began paying closer attention. He noticed how Victoria made excuses to attend neighborhood functions when he was away, how she had suddenly become interested in real estate, often mentioning Henderson's latest development projects at dinner, how she'd started dressing differently, spending more on clothes and cosmetics. One evening, Russell was helping Leo with his math homework when Victoria burst into the dining room wearing a new dress. "I'm heading to the charity auction at the country club," she announced. "Don't wait up. I thought that was next week," Russell said, his voice neutral despite the alarm bells ringing in his head. "They changed it," Victoria replied too quickly. "It was in the email." Russell nodded, then turned back to Leo's homework. "So, if you multiply these two numbers first." After she left, Russell opened his laptop and checked the country club's website. The charity auction was indeed scheduled for the following week. He closed the laptop slowly, his expression unchanged. "Dad," Leo asked, "are you and Mom okay?" Russell looked at his son, seeing the worry in eyes that were so like his own. "We're just going through some grown-up stuff, buddy. Nothing for you to worry about." But Leo was perceptive, another trait he'd inherited from his father. "She seems angry all the time. Is it because of money? I heard her talking to Grandpa about it." "What did she say?" Russell asked carefully. Leo fidgeted with his pencil. "That you're too cautious with money. That other dads in the neighborhood make more and work less." She seemed really upset. Russell placed his hand on Leo's shoulder. "Money isn't everything, Leo, and there are different kinds of wealth. Remember that." The next day, Russell installed a small, discreet security system in their home. For their protection, he told Victoria, who rolled her eyes but didn't argue. What he didn't tell her was that it included activity logs for the house alarm and garage door. Over the following weeks, the log showed Victoria leaving the house at odd hours, always when Russell was either working late or out of town. The coincidence was too perfect to be chance. Russell also noticed that Henderson had been finding reasons to drop by their house, to discuss the neighborhood association, to borrow tools Russell knew the man didn't need, to invite them to parties that Victoria attended alone when Russell was away. "You should see Henderson's new lake house," Victoria said over dinner one night. "It's absolutely stunning. He showed me pictures." "When was this?" Russell asked mildly. Victoria paused, fork halfway at her mouth. "Oh, at the grocery store. We ran into each other." Russell nodded and continued eating. Victoria became flustered, talking too much about nothing important. That weekend, Russell took Leo fishing, something they both enjoyed but rarely had time for with Leo's busy schedule of activities that Victoria insisted upon. "Dad," Leo said as they sat quietly on the dock at the local lake, "do you think Mr. Henderson is nice?" Russell kept his eyes on his fishing line. "Why do you ask?" Leo shrugged. "Mom talks about him a lot, and I saw him at our house yesterday when you were at work. He didn't see me because I was upstairs, but he brought Mom flowers." Russell felt a cold anger settle in his chest, but his face remained calm. "Is that right?" "Yeah. I didn't like the way he looked at Mom. It was weird." Russell reeled in his lines slowly. "Some people aren't what they seem, Leo. It's important to watch people's actions, not just listen to their words. Like how you do with the bad guys in your job." Russell smiled slightly. "Something like that." That night, Russell lay awake beside Victoria, listening to her breathe and thinking about what needed to be done. Not yet, he decided. He needed more information, more evidence. Russell Donovan never acted without a complete picture and a solid plan. It wasn't in his nature to rush, no matter how deep the betrayal. And betrayal, Russell knew, demanded a response. Not quick and emotional, but calculated and complete. He'd learned that lesson years ago in places most people couldn't find on a map, from men whose names would never appear in history books. When the time came, Victoria and Henderson would learn it too. Chapter 3. The Birthday Revelation. The day of Leo's birthday party dawned bright and clear. Russell had been up since 5, his military habits unchanged by civilian life. He sat at the kitchen table, checking his watch. Victoria had come home late the night before, claiming she'd been at her book club. Russell knew the book club had ended 3 hours before she'd arrived home. He'd called the host, Amy Peterson, pretending to be looking for Victoria. Amy had told him Victoria had left right after the meeting ended at 9 p.m. Victoria had stumbled in just after midnight, smelling of expensive cologne that wasn't Russell's. Now she swept into the kitchen at 8, already dressed and made up for the day. "The caterers will be here at 11, she said without looking at him. "And the gift I ordered for Leo is being delivered at 10. Make sure you're here to sign for it." "What did you get him?" Russell asked, sipping his coffee. Victoria smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her in weeks. "Something special. Something that will make him the envy of all his friends." Russell nodded. "I'll be here." The delivery arrived exactly at 10. A large box containing a high-end drone with a 4K camera and advanced features. The price tag, which Russell found still attached to the box, made him raise an eyebrow. It was nearly $2,000, money they didn't have to spare. The party began at noon. Leo was excited, surrounded by friends from school and the neighborhood. Russell watched as Victoria played the perfect hostess, laughing and charming everyone. Henderson arrived fashionably late, bringing an expensive gaming console for Leo, another extravagant gift that made Russell's practical camping equipment for their planned summer trip seem inadequate by comparison. When it came time for gifts, Victoria insisted Leo open hers last. When he finally unwrapped the drone, his eyes widened with excitement. "Wow, Mom, this is awesome," he exclaimed. Victoria beamed, then looked directly at Russell. "Something your daddy could never afford," she said loudly, drawing uncomfortable laughter from some guests and awkward silence from others. Russell's face remained impassive, but Sam caught his eye from across the room, giving him a questioning look. Russell gave a slight shake of his head. "Not now." After the gifts, as the children played in the backyard, Russell noticed Leo taking the drone out of its box. "Need help setting it up?" he offered. Leo nodded eagerly. "Can we fly today?" "Sure," Russell said. "Let me just read the instructions first." They set up the drone together, Russell carefully explaining the controls and safety features. "Remember, Leo, this is not a toy. It's a responsibility. You need to be careful where you fly it." Leo nodded solemnly. "I will, Dad. I promise." The party wound down around 4, with Victoria showing the last guests out while Russell cleaned up in the kitchen. He noticed Henderson lingering, speaking quietly with Victoria at the door. They stood too close, their body language intimate and familiar. Russell turned away, continuing to load the dishwasher as if he hadn't seen. An hour later, Leo came running into the house, tears streaming down his face. Russell was instantly alert. "What's wrong, buddy?" "The drone," Leo sobbed. "It flew into Mr. Henderson's window. It recorded him and Mommy." He couldn't continue, overcome by his crying. Russell knelt down, placing his hands on Leo's shoulders. "Slow down, Leo. Take a deep breath. Tell me what happened." Leo wiped his eyes, trying to calm himself. "I was practicing with the drone in the backyard like you showed me. But I lost control, and it flew toward Mr. Henderson's house. It went right up to his bedroom window." He paused, looking ashamed. "I could see through the camera on my controller. Mom was there with Mr. Henderson. They were kissing and stuff. I got scared and tried to fly the drone away, but it hit the window and fell. I ran over to get it, but they saw me. Mom looked really mad. She told me to go home and not say anything to you." Russell kept his face calm despite the rage building inside him. "You did the right thing by telling me, Leo. Can I see the drone?" Leo handed over the slightly damaged drone. "The memory card is still in it. It records everything automatically." Russell nodded, taking the drone. "Why don't you go upstairs and play your new video games? I need to check if the drone can be fixed." After Leo went upstairs, Russell removed the memory card and plugged it into his laptop. The footage was clear and damning. Victoria entering Henderson's house, being led upstairs to the bedroom. The drone had captured several minutes through the window before crashing. There was no mistaking what was happening or who was involved. Russell copied the files to a secure drive, then replaced the memory card in the drone. He sat motionless at his desk for several minutes, his mind working through scenarios and outcomes. Then he picked up his phone and called Marina Reeves. "Marina, it's Russell. I need to meet with you. Tomorrow morning, if possible. It's important. Is everything okay, Russ?" Marina asked, concern evident in her voice. "No," Russell replied, "but it will be." When Victoria returned home an hour later, Her face was flushed, and she wouldn't meet Russell's eyes. "We need to talk about the drone," Russell said calmly. Victoria's eyes darted to his. "What about it?" "Leo crashed it. I'm going to try to repair it tomorrow." Relief flooded Victoria's face. "Oh, well, he needs to be more careful with expensive things." Russell studied her, noting the lipstick smudged at the corner of her mouth, the slight disarray of her carefully styled hair. "Yes," he said finally, "we all need to be more careful." That night, as Victoria slept beside him, Russell lay awake, his mind working through his next moves like a chess master planning 10 steps ahead. By morning, he had his plan. Victoria and Henderson had made a critical error in judgment, underestimating him because of his quiet nature. They were about to learn what his enemies overseas had learned the hard way. Russell Donovan was not a man to be betrayed. Chapter 4. Strategic Withdrawal. The morning after Leo's birthday party, Russell rose before dawn. He packed a small bag with essentials and quietly entered Leo's room. He gently woke his son. "Leo," he whispered, "I need you to come with me for a little while. Don't wake your mother." Leo rubbed his eyes, but didn't question his father. He trusted Russell implicitly. They slipped out of the house and into Russell's SUV. "Where are we going, Dad?" Leo asked as they drove through the silent streets. "To stay with Uncle Sam for a bit," Russell replied. "I have some things to take care of, and I need you to be somewhere safe." Sam Westfield lived in a comfortable ranch house on the outskirts of town. He answered the door immediately when Russell called, taking one look at their faces and ushering them inside without question. "The guest rooms are made up," Sam said. "Leo, there's cereal in the kitchen if you're hungry." After Leo had settled in with breakfast and cartoons, Russell explained the situation to Sam. "Jesus, Russ," Sam muttered when he finished. "What are you going to do?" "End it," Russell said simply. "But I need to do it right. I can't let Victoria have custody of Leo, and I can't let Henderson walk away unscathed." Sam nodded. "Whatever you need, brother. You know I got your back." Russell's next stop was Marina Reeves' law office. The former military attorney listened without interruption as Russell laid out what had happened and showed her the drone footage. "This is pretty damning evidence of the affair," Marina said, "and the fact that she publicly humiliated you at the party adds to our case." "But Russell, what exactly do you want out of this?" "Full custody of Leo," Russell replied without hesitation. "And I want Victoria to get nothing from our marriage. Not the house, not alimony, nothing." Marina frowned. "That's going to be tough, even with this evidence. The courts generally favor arrangements where both parents remain involved." "There's more," Russell said. "Victoria's been spending recklessly, putting us in debt. And I believe she and Henderson have been planning something. I need time to find out what." Marina studied him. "You're not telling me everything, are you?" Russell met her gaze steadily. "You don't need to know everything. You just need to prepare the strongest possible divorce case while I gather more evidence." Marina sighed. "All right, but Russ, be careful. Don't do anything that could jeopardize your case or your future with Leo." Russell nodded, but they both knew he would do whatever he deemed necessary. Over the next 2 days, Russell implemented the first phase of his plan. He moved most of their liquid assets to accounts only he could access, leaving enough in the joint accounts to avoid immediate suspicion. He installed spyware on Victoria's laptop and placed a small recording device in her car. He systematically documented every questionable expenditure she had made over the past year. Meanwhile, Victoria had been calling repeatedly, her messages growing increasingly frantic and then angry. Russell responded only with brief texts stating that he and Leo were safe and needed some time apart after what had happened. On the third day, Russell returned to the house when he knew Victoria would be out. He gathered more of Leo's things and some additional evidence he had hidden in his office. As he was leaving, he noticed a file folder that had fallen behind Victoria's desk. Inside were documents related to Henderson's latest development project, a luxury resort on land just outside the city limits. Paperwork showed that Bennett Hargrove, Victoria's father, was secretly listed as a minority investor, despite having no visible means to make such an investment. Russell photographed everything, then replaced the file exactly as he had found it. Another piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. That evening, Russell received a text from Victoria, Please come home. We need to talk about this like adults. I can explain everything. Russell replied, I'll meet you tomorrow. Neutral location. The cafe on Main Street at 10 a.m. Victoria arrived at the cafe, looking impeccable as always, but Russell noted the strain around her eyes, the tightness in her smile. Where's Leo? She demanded as soon as she sat down. Safe, Russell replied. With people who care about him. Victoria's eyes flashed. He's my son too, Russell. You can't just take him. Like you weren't planning to take him when you left me for Henderson? Russell asked mildly. Victoria blanched. What are you talking about? Russell placed his phone on the table between them and played a short clip of the drone footage. Victoria's face drained of color. It was a mistake, she whispered. It didn't mean anything. A 6-month affair doesn't happen by mistake, Russell said. And from what Leo has told me, you've been bringing Henderson to our house when I'm away. In what world is that not meaning anything? Victoria's expression hardened. Fine. Yes, Nate and I have been seeing each other. Can you blame me? You're never home. And when you are, you're emotionally absent. Nate makes me feel alive, appreciated, and wealthy. Russell added. That comment at Leo's party wasn't subtle, Victoria. She had the grace to look ashamed. I shouldn't have said that. But it's true, isn't it? You've never been ambitious enough. We could have had so much more. Russell studied her, seeing clearly for the first time the stranger he had married. I'm filing for divorce. I want full custody of Leo. Victoria laughed bitterly. Good luck with that. No judge is going to give full custody to a father who's constantly traveling for work. And besides, you can't afford the legal battle. I've seen our finances. Have you? Russell asked quietly. Something in his tone made Victoria pause. What have you done? What I needed to do to protect my son, Russell replied. That's all you need to know for now. He stood to leave. Victoria grabbed his wrist. Don't do this, Russ. We can work something out. For Leo's sake. Russell looked down at her hand until she released him. You should have thought about Leo before you started sleeping with our neighbor and planning to leave me. He turned to go, then looked back. By the way, tell your father his investment with Henderson is interesting. I wonder where he got the money. The color drained from Victoria's face again. How did you? I noticed things, Victoria. I always have. You and Henderson just never took me seriously enough to realize that. Russell walked away, leaving Victoria staring after him in shock. Back at Sam's house, Russell reviewed what he had learned. Victoria and Henderson were clearly planning something involving the resort development, with Bennett Hargrove somehow involved despite his financial ruin. The pieces were starting to fit together, but Russell needed more information. That night, after Leo was asleep, Russell shared his suspicions with Sam. I think Henderson is using Victoria and her father for something related to this resort development, he said. Bennett doesn't have the money to be an investor. Sam frowned. Money laundering? Russell shook his head. I'm not sure yet, but I'm going to find out. And when I do, I'm going to make sure Victoria, Henderson, and anyone else involved pays for what they've done. Sam looked troubled. Just be careful, Russ. Don't cross any lines you can't come back from. Russell's expression was cold. They crossed those lines first when they involved my son in their schemes. There's no coming back from that. Chapter 5. The Plan Forms. Russell spent the next week gathering intelligence like he would for any military operation. He used contact from his security work to run deep background checks on Henderson and Bennett Hargrove. He studied the resort development plans and ownership structures. He monitored Victoria's activities through the surveillance he had set up. What emerged was a picture more complex than a simple affair. Henderson's resort project was being built on land that had been rezoned from agricultural to commercial under suspicious circumstances. Bennett Hargrove, despite his gambling debts, was listed as owning a 10% share. And Victoria had been making regular cash withdrawals from their joint accounts for months, money that couldn't be accounted for in her spending. Russell also discovered that Henderson had a pattern of using romantic relationships to further his business interests. 3 of his previous development projects had involved partnerships with men whose wives or daughters Henderson had been involved with. In each case, the developments had proceeded despite local opposition or regulatory concerns. He's using Victoria to get to something, Russell told Marina during one of their meetings. and I think her father is involved somehow. Marina reviewed the documents Russell had brought. This is circumstantial at best, Russell. It doesn't prove any wrongdoing. Not yet, Russell agreed. But it will. Marina gave him a concerned look. What are you planning? Russell shook his head. The less you know, the better. Just be ready when I give the word. That evening, Russell received an unexpected visitor at Sam's house, Bennett Hargrove himself. I know Leo is here, the older man said when Russell answered the door. Victoria is beside herself with worry. Is she? Russell replied coldly. Or is she worried about what else I might know? Bennett shifted uncomfortably. Look, Russell, I know things are difficult right now, but cut the act, Bennett, Russell interrupted. I know about your involvement in Henderson's resort project. What I don't know is where you got the money to invest, given your gambling debts. Bennett's face hardened. You've always looked down on me, haven't you? The blue-collar soldier who married into what he thought was money, only to discover the well had run dry. I never cared about your money, Russell said. I cared about Victoria and the family we built, or thought we built. Bennett laughed bitterly. Victoria was never meant to marry someone like you. She has ambitions, dreams that you could never fulfill. Like being with a man who uses her for his business schemes? Russell asked. Henderson has a history, Bennett. He's using both of you. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Bennett's face before he masked it. You don't know what you're talking about. Nathaniel is helping us secure our future, something you failed to do. Is that what he told you? Interesting. Russell leaned against the doorframe. Tell Victoria that Leo is staying with me for now, and tell Henderson that I'm watching every move he makes. After Bennett left, Russell called an old contact from his military days who now worked in banking compliance. Doug, I need a favor, Russell said when the man answered. I need to know about any unusual transactions involving Nathaniel Henderson, Bennett Hargrove, or Victoria Donovan in the last year. That's pushing some boundaries, Russ, Doug replied cautiously. I know, but it's important. Family important. There was a pause. Give me a couple of days. 2 days later, Doug called back. You were right to be suspicious. There's been a series of wire transfers from offshore accounts to a shell company that then invested in Henderson's resort project. Bennett Hargrove is listed as the owner of the shell company, but the money isn't his. Whose is it? Russell asked. Can't say for sure, but the trail leads back to some people you don't want to be involved with. The kind that don't ask nicely when they want their money back. Russell thanked Doug and hung up, his mind racing. The picture was becoming clearer. Henderson was using dirty money for his development, funneling it through Bennett to make it appear legitimate. And Victoria, whether she fully understood it or not, was complicit. That night, Russell formulated his plan. It would require precision timing, careful documentation, and a willingness to push legal boundaries, all skills he had honed during his military career. By morning, he had every step mapped out. First, he needed to get Victoria and Henderson to believe they had the upper hand. He sent Victoria a message agreeing to discuss a divorce settlement, suggesting that he would be willing to compromise on custody if she was reasonable about financial terms. Then he contacted a real estate developer who competed with Henderson, offering information about potential irregularities in the resort project in exchange for financial backing for his legal battle with Victoria. The developer, eager to derail his rival's project, agreed immediately. Next, Russell reached out to a journalist he had helped during a previous security consultation, promising an exclusive story about corruption in local development projects. The journalist, sensing a career-making exposé, was eager to investigate. Finally, Russell briefed Sam and Marina on their roles in the plan. This is walking a fine line, Russ, Marina warned. If you go too far, you could lose everything, including Leo. I know the risks, Russell replied, but I also know what's at stake. Henderson and Victoria thought they could use my son as a pawn in their game. They're about to learn that was their biggest mistake. As the pieces of his plan fell into place, Russell felt a cold satisfaction. For months, Victoria and Henderson had underestimated him, seeing his quiet demeanor as weakness. They had never understood that his silence was not the absence of thought, but the presence of calculation. Now they would learn the true cost of betrayal. Chapter 6. Setting the Trap. The key to Russell's plan was making Victoria and Henderson believe they were winning while he systematically dismantled their scheme from the shadows. He arranged a meeting with Victoria and her newly hired divorce attorney, a slick operator named Philip Conrad, who was known for aggressive tactics. "I'm prepared to be reasonable about this," Russell told them, projecting an air of resignation. "I want what's best for Leo." Conrad smiled smugly. "My client is pleased to hear that. We propose joint custody, with Leo primarily residing with his mother. And of course, Mrs. Donovan will retain the house and receive appropriate spousal support." Russell appeared to consider this. "I'll need to think about it and discuss it with Leo." "Leo is 12, Victoria snapped. "He doesn't get to decide these things." "No," Russell agreed mildly. "But his feelings matter to me." After the meeting, Russell put the next phase of his plan into motion. He arranged for Leo to speak with a child psychologist who specialized in custody cases, carefully documenting his son's distress over his mother's affair and her behavior toward Russell. Meanwhile, the journalist Russell had contacted began investigating Henderson's development project, asking questions about the rezoning process and the source of funding. Russell anonymously provided documents showing Bennett Hardro's sudden financial recovery and investment in the project, raising questions about where the money had come from. Henderson, predictably, responded by accelerating his timeline. Construction equipment appeared at the resort site, and there was a splashy announcement in the local press about groundbreaking ceremonies. Victoria began moving personal items out of the house when she thought Russell wouldn't notice, preparations for a new life with Henderson once the divorce was finalized. Russell allowed all of this to happen while he worked behind the scenes. He met with Doug again, this time bringing Marina along to document what they learned about the money trail. He had the competing developer inspect the resort site, confirming that Henderson was cutting corners on environmental requirements and safety regulations. Most crucially, Russell had Sam, who worked in IT security, help him recover deleted emails from Victoria's laptop that showed she was fully aware of the questionable financing behind Henderson's project. In one particularly damning exchange, she discussed with Henderson how they would use Leo's custody to pressure Russell into a quick divorce settlement so they could move forward with their plans. "They're planning to use Leo as leverage," Russell told Marina, showing her the emails. "They think I'll give up everything else to maintain my relationship with my son." Marina's expression hardened. "This changes things. We can use this to argue that Victoria is putting her own interests above Leo's welfare." The trap was nearly set. Russell made one final move. He contacted Henderson directly, requesting a man-to-man meeting. "I want to clear the air," Russell told him when they met at a local bar. "This situation has gotten out of hand." Henderson, confident in his position, was condescending. "I'm glad you're being sensible, Russell. Victoria was concerned you might make this difficult." "I just want what's fair," Russell replied, carefully nursing a single beer while Henderson drank heavily. "And I want to understand what your intentions are regarding my son." Henderson waved a dismissive hand. "Leo will be well taken care of. Victoria and I plan to marry once the divorce is finalized. The boy will want for nothing. And the resort project? I understand Leo's grandfather is an investor." Henderson's eyes narrowed slightly. "Bennett has made some smart financial decisions lately. It's none of your concern." Russell nodded thoughtfully. "Of course. I was just curious about the timing, given his previous financial troubles." Henderson leaned forward. "Let me be clear, Russell. The sooner you accept that you've lost, the better for everyone. Victoria doesn't want you. She never really did. You were a placeholder until something better came along." He smiled cruelly. "And I'm something better." Russell kept his expression neutral despite the rage burning inside him. "I appreciate your honesty, Nathaniel." As Henderson continued drinking and gloating, Russell asked casual questions about the resort project, encouraging the developer to boast about his plans and the profits they would generate. By the end of the evening, Henderson had revealed far more than he intended about the project's financing and the corners being cut to maximize returns. Russell recorded every word. That night, he finalized his preparations. Everything was in place for the trap to spring. The evidence compiled, the witnesses prepared, the legal documents drafted. Victoria and Henderson believed they were on the verge of victory, unaware that Russell had systematically undermined every aspect of their plan. Tomorrow would be the day of reckoning. As Russell checked on the sleeping Leo, he felt a calm certainty. Those who had betrayed him were about to learn the consequences of their actions. And Russell Donovan was not a man who forgave betrayal, not from his wife, not from anyone. Chapter 7. Spring the Trap. The trap was sprung with precise timing. The morning began with a court hearing for temporary custody arrangements during the divorce proceedings. Victoria arrived with Conrad, confident that her status as the mother would give her the advantage. She faltered when she saw Russell sitting calmly beside Marina, a thick folder of documents on the table before them. "What is all that?" Victoria whispered to her lawyer, who shrugged dismissively. "Probably just for show," Conrad replied. "Don't worry. Judge Eleanor Watkins, known for her no-nonsense approach to family court, called the hearing to order." Conrad presented their case first, painting Russell as an absent father whose work took him away from home for extended periods. He emphasized Victoria's role as the primary caregiver and suggested that maintaining Leo's residence with his mother would provide stability during a difficult transition. When it was Marina's turn, she approached the bench with a folder. "Your Honor, before we proceed with our arguments regarding temporary custody, we would like to present evidence of Ms. Donovan's misconduct that directly bears on her fitness as Leo's primary caregiver." Conrad jumped to his feet. "Objection. This is a custody hearing, not a trial for my client's alleged misconduct." Judge Watkins frowned. "I'll hear what Ms. Reeves has to present, and then determine its relevance." "Proceed, Counselor." Marina methodically laid out the evidence. The drone footage showing Victoria's affair, emails discussing how to use Leo as leverage in the divorce, documentation of Victoria's reckless spending that had placed the family in financial jeopardy, and statement from Leo's psychologist about the boy's distress over his mother's behavior. Victoria's face grew increasingly pale as Marina spoke. Conrad attempted multiple objections, but Judge Watkins overruled each one. "Additionally, Your Honor," Marina continued, "we have evidence suggesting Ms. Donovan is involved in questionable financial dealings with her paramour, Nathaniel Henderson, which could place Leo in an unstable and potentially illegal environment." At this, Victoria gasped audibly. Conrad leaned over, whispering furiously in her ear. Judge Watkins reviewed the materials, her expression growing more severe by the minute. Finally, she looked up. "In light of this evidence, I am granting temporary full custody to Mr. Donovan, with supervised visitation for Ms. Donovan pending further investigation of these allegations. This court takes very seriously any attempt to use a child as leverage in divorce proceedings." Victoria stood shakily. "Your Honor, I—" "Sit down, Ms. Donovan." Judge Watkins interrupted sharply. "Your attorney can address the court on your behalf." As they left the courthouse, Victoria confronted Russell. "You set me up," she hissed. "This isn't over." Russell looked at her calmly. "No, it isn't. But the drone footage was just the beginning, Victoria. You might want to warn Henderson to check the news this afternoon." While Victoria rushed to call Henderson, Russell moved to the second phase of his plan. The journalist he had contacted published a detailed expose on Henderson's resort project, highlighting the mysterious financing through Bennett Hargrove's shell company, the questionable rezoning process, and the environmental regulations being ignored during construction. By mid-afternoon, local television stations were reporting that county officials had issued a stop work order for the resort project pending investigation. Henderson's phone began ringing incessantly as investors and business partners demanded explanations. Meanwhile, Doug from Banking Compliance had forwarded Russell's evidence of suspicious financial transactions to federal authorities. By late afternoon, agents were at Henderson's office with warrants, seizing computers and documents related to the resort project. Victoria tried repeatedly to reach Henderson, growing increasingly frantic as he didn't answer. When she finally drove to his house, she found federal agents there as well, conducting another search. She was turned away at the perimeter they had established. Desperate and confused, Victoria returned to the family home to find Russell and Sam removing the last of Leo's belongings. "What have you done?" she demanded, her carefully maintained composure finally cracking. Do you have any idea what you've set in motion? Russell faced her calmly. I know exactly what I've done, Victoria. I've exposed the truth about you, about Henderson, about the resort project. Did you really think I wouldn't find out what you were planning? Victoria's expression shifted from anger to fear. It wasn't what you think. Nate promised it was all legitimate. The resort was going to fix everything, Daddy's finances, our future. At what cost? Russell asked. Did you ever consider what would happen to Leo when it all fell apart? Because it was always going to fall apart, Victoria. Henderson was using dirty money, and sooner or later, the people behind that money would have come looking for returns. Victoria sank into a chair, her face ashen. You don't understand what you've done. These people, they're dangerous. I understand perfectly, Russell replied. And unlike Henderson, I know how to deal with dangerous people. I spent 15 years doing exactly that. As if on cue, Russell's phone rang. He answered, listened briefly, then hung up. That was Marina. The federal investigation has expanded to include Bennett. They're questioning him now about the shell company and the source of his investment funds. Victoria looked up in horror. Daddy? But he didn't know. He knew enough, Russell said flatly. Just like you did. You were all willing to risk everything, including Leo's future, for money and status. Sam finished loading the last box into Russell's SUV and stepped back inside. That's everything, Russ. Leo's room is clear. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. You're taking everything from me. No, Victoria. You gave it all away when you decided our family wasn't enough for you. Russell turned to leave, then paused. By the way, I've instructed Marina to send all correspondence regarding the divorce to Conrad. I won't be speaking with you directly again. As Russell drove away with Sam, Victoria remained in the house alone, surrounded by the wreckage of the life she had sabotaged. That evening, as news of Henderson's legal troubles dominated local media, Russell sat with Leo at Sam's house, helping him with homework as if it were any normal day. Dad, Leo asked hesitantly, are you and Mom getting divorced? Russell set down the math textbook and met his son's eyes. Yes, buddy, we are. I'm sorry things have turned out this way. Leo was quiet for a moment. Is it because of what the drone recorded? Partly, Russell admitted. But it's more complicated than that. Sometimes adults make choices that hurt the people they're supposed to love and protect. Your mom made some of those choices. Will I still see her? Russell nodded. Yes. The judge said you can visit her with someone else there to make sure everything is okay. But you'll be living with me for now. Leo considered this. I'm glad I'm staying with you, Dad. You always tell me the truth, even when it's hard. Russell felt a tightness in his chest at his son's trust. I always will, Leo. That's a promise. As Leo went to bed, Russell received another call, this time from Doug. It's worse than we thought, Russ, his friend said without preamble. The money trail leads back to some serious players. International guys with connections to organized crime. If Henderson was planning to cut them out or lose their investment, it would have gotten ugly. How ugly? Russell asked. Doug's voice was grim. The kind of ugly where people disappear. These aren't people who file lawsuits when deals go bad. Russell thanked him and hung up, his suspicions confirmed. Henderson had entangled Victoria, Bennett, and by extension Leo, in something far more dangerous than they realized. The man's greed and arrogance would have eventually put them all at risk. The trap Russell had set hadn't just exposed an affair or secured custody of his son. It had potentially saved their lives. Chapter 8, The Downfall. The next 2 weeks saw the complete unraveling of Henderson's empire. Federal investigators uncovered evidence of money laundering going back years, with the resort project being just the latest and largest scheme. Henderson's previous developments came under scrutiny as well, revealing similar patterns of questionable financing and regulatory shortcuts. Bennett Hargrove, facing serious charges related to the shell company, quickly turned on Henderson in exchange for leniency. He provided investigators with documents showing that Henderson had orchestrated the entire arrangement, using Bennett as a front for the illegal funds. Henderson preyed on my financial vulnerability, Bennett told authorities. He promised to restore my fortune if I helped facilitate certain investments. I didn't ask enough questions about where the money was coming from. Victoria, meanwhile, found herself increasingly isolated. Friend from a neighborhood avoided her as news of the scandal spread. Her attorney, Conrad, withdrew from the divorce case when it became clear how extensively she was implicated in Henderson's activities. The expensive clothes and jewelry she had accumulated were seized as potential proceeds of money laundering. Russell watched it all unfold from a distance, focused on establishing a stable new routine for Leo. He found a smaller house in a different neighborhood, enrolled Leo in therapy to help him process the family's dissolution, and arranged his work schedule to maximize his time at home. One evening, Marina called with news from the divorce proceedings. Victoria's new attorney is proposing a settlement, she said. Given her current circumstances, she's willing to concede full legal custody to you, with limited supervised visitation. She's also not contesting the financial terms we proposed. No alimony, no claim on the retirement accounts. Russell confirmed. None, Marina replied. To be honest, Russell, she's in no position to demand anything. With the federal investigation ongoing and her involvement with Henderson documented, she's facing potential charges herself. This is the best outcome she can hope for. Russell considered this. I'll agree to the terms, but with one addition. I want it in writing that she will never attempt to use Leo to get back at me or to gain access to any of our financial resources. I'll make sure it's ironclad, Marina promised. 2 days later, Henderson was arrested attempting to flee the country. Federal agents intercepted him at a private airfield with a suitcase containing over $1 million in cash and false identification documents. The news made national headlines, with Henderson's mugshot appearing on every major network. Russell received an unexpected visitor that evening, Detective Carlos Mendez from the County Financial Crimes Unit. I wanted to thank you personally, Mendez said when Russell invited him in. Your information about Henderson's operations broke open a case we've been building for years. That man has been corrupting local officials and laundering money through our community for a decade. Russell shrugged. I was protecting my family. The rest was collateral damage. Mendez studied him knowingly. I've read your service record, Mr. Donovan. I don't believe for a second that you didn't know exactly what you were setting in motion. Does it matter? Russell asked. Not to me, Mendez replied. Henderson got what he deserved. But I am curious. How did you know to look into his financing? Russell considered his answer carefully. When you've spent as much time as I have in regions where legitimate business and criminal enterprise overlap, you develop an instinct for when something doesn't add up. Henderson was building an empire that mathematics couldn't explain. Mendez nodded. Well, whatever your methods, the result is a corrupt developer facing justice and potentially dozens of compromised officials being exposed. Not a bad outcome for what started as a domestic dispute. After the detective left, Russell sat alone in his living room, reflecting on the chain of events that had led to this point. He felt no satisfaction, no joy in Henderson's downfall or Victoria's humiliation. What he felt was a cold, clear certainty that justice had been served. They had conspired to take everything from him, his son, his dignity, his future. Instead, they had lost everything themselves. His phone rang, displaying Victoria's number. Russell let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, a text message appeared. Please, Russ, I need to talk to you. Everything's falling apart. Russell deleted the message without replying. Victoria had made her choices. Now she would live with the consequences. The following day, Russell received a call from Sam, who had contacts in federal law enforcement. Thought you should know, Sam said. They found evidence that Henderson was skimming from the investors behind the resort project. These aren't people who forgive that kind of thing. He's being moved to protective custody. And Victoria? Russell asked. She's cooperating with investigators, Sam replied, trading whatever information she has for immunity. But her reputation is destroyed. No one in town will have anything to do with her now. Russell thought about Leo, who was slowly adjusting to their new life. The boy still asked about his mother occasionally, but with decreasing frequency as the weeks passed. Has Bennett said anything about me? Russell asked. Apparently, he told investigators that he underestimated you, Sam said with a hint of satisfaction. So they all did. Called it the biggest mistake of his life. Russell ended the call and went to check on Leo, who was working on a science project in his room. Watching his son concentrate, Russell felt the familiar surge of protectiveness. Everything he had done, all the calculated moves and careful planning, had been for this, to ensure Leo's safety and future. What Victoria and Henderson never understood was that Russell Donovan would stop at nothing to protect what was his. They had mistaken his quietness for weakness, his patience for passivity. It was a miscalculation that had cost them everything. Chapter 9. The Legacy of Betrayal. 3 months after Henderson's arrest, the full extent of his criminal operation had been exposed. The resort project land sat abandoned, construction equipment removed, the once ambitious development reduced to architectural drawings that would never be realized. Henderson himself remained in federal custody, facing decades in prison for money laundering, wire fraud, and numerous other financial crimes. Bennett Hargrove had received a more lenient sentence in exchange for his testimony, but at 72, even 5 years in a minimum security facility felt like a life sentence. His reputation, the thing he had valued above all else, was irreparably destroyed. Victoria had avoided criminal charges through her cooperation with federal authorities, but the price was steep. Her immunity deal required her to testify against both Henderson and her father, earning her their hatred along with public scorn. She had been forced to sell most of her possessions to pay legal fees and had moved to a small apartment on the other side of town. Russell had heard through Marina that Victoria had found a job as a receptionist at a dental office, a far cry from the luxury lifestyle she had once enjoyed. Her supervised visitations with Leo were awkward and strained, the boy increasingly reluctant to spend time with the mother who had betrayed his father and upended his life. One evening, as Russell was working in his home office, the doorbell rang. He checked the security camera he had installed and was surprised to see Victoria standing on his porch. She looked different, her designer clothes replaced by simple jeans and a sweater, her hair unstyled, her face free of makeup. Russell considered not answering, but Leo was at a friend's house, and he wanted to hear what Victoria thought was important enough to warrant an unannounced visit. "What do you want, Victoria?" he asked, standing in the doorway without inviting her in. "I just wanted to talk," she said, her voice lacking the confidence it once held. "I've been doing a lot of thinking during all of this." And Russell kept his tone neutral. "I wanted to apologize," Victoria said, looking down. "I know it doesn't change anything, but I am sorry for what I did to you and Leo. I got caught up in Henderson's promises, in the lifestyle he dangled in front of me. I convinced myself that you and Leo would be better off in the long run." Russell studied her, noting the dark circles under her eyes, the weight she had lost, the nervous way she fidgeted with her purse strap. For a moment, he remembered the woman he had once loved, before ambition and greed had consumed her. "Why are you really here, Victoria?" he asked. She looked up, tears in her eyes. "I miss Leo. The supervised visits are so formal, so cold. He barely speaks to me. I was hoping that we could work something out. For his sake." "For his sake," Russell repeated. "Not for yours." "Of course I want to rebuild my relationship with my son," Victoria admitted. "But I understand now how selfish I've been. I want to make things right, if that's even possible." Russell considered her words, searching for manipulation or deceit. He found only desperation and regret. "Leo is starting to heal," he said finally. "He's doing well in school again, making friends in the new neighborhood, getting back to being a normal kid." "I'm glad," Victoria said softly. "He deserves that." "Yes, he does," Russell agreed. "Which is why nothing is going to change, Victoria. The custody arrangement stays as it is. Leo stays with me. Your supervised visits continue until the court decides otherwise." Victoria's face fell. "I understand, but maybe in time." "No," Russell interrupted, his voice hardening. "There is no in time. There is no reconciliation. You didn't just betray me, Victoria. You betrayed our son. You were willing to use him as a pawn in your game with Henderson. That's something I will never forgive." "Russ, please," Victoria whispered, tears streaming down her face now. "People make mistakes. I made a terrible one, but I'm still Leo's mother." "Biology doesn't make you a parent," Russell replied coldly. Actions do. And your actions showed exactly what kind of mother you are. Leo deserves better. Victoria wiped her eyes. So that's it? You'll never let me be part of his life again. You have your court-mandated visitation, Russell said. That's more than you deserve. If Leo chooses to have a relationship with you when he's older, that will be his decision. Until then, this is how it stays. You've always been so unforgiving, Victoria said bitterly. So cold. Russell's expression remained impassive. No, Victoria. I'm not cold. I'm protective. There's a difference. I protect what matters to me. Leo matters. You lost that privilege when you chose Henderson over your family. Victoria stared at him for a long moment, then turned and walked away. Russell watched until she got in her car and drove off before closing the door. He felt no satisfaction in her pain, no pleasure in her downfall. What he felt was resolution, the certainty that he had done what was necessary to protect his son and secure their future. 6 months later, life had settled into a new normal. Russell had scaled back his international consulting work to be more present for Leo, focusing on domestic clients that required less travel. Leo was thriving in his new school, the trauma of his parents' divorce fading as stability returned to his life. Marina called one morning with news about Henderson's case. He's accepted a plea deal, she told Russell. 25 years. With his age, he'll likely die in prison. And the money? Russell asked. Most of it's been seized, Marina replied, including the funds that were supposed to go to the investors he was skimming from. Word is they're not happy about that. Russell understood the implication. Henderson would spend whatever remained of his life looking over his shoulder, even in federal prison. Some enemies couldn't be escaped. That afternoon, Russell received an email from Victoria's latest attorney, requesting a modification to the visitation schedule. Russell forwarded it to Marina without reading the detailed proposal. His position was unchanged and would remain so. That evening, as Russell helped Leo with a new drone he had bought him, a simple, age-appropriate model, his son asked an unexpected question. Dad, do you ever miss Mom? Russell set down the controller and considered his answer carefully. I miss the person I thought she was, he said honestly. But that person didn't exist. Leo nodded thoughtfully. Grandpa Bennett writes me letters from prison sometimes. He wants me to forgive him. And do you want to? Russell asked. Leo shrugged. I don't know. He's still my grandpa, but he did bad things. People make choices, Leo, Russell said. And those choices have consequences. Sometimes forgiveness is possible. Sometimes it isn't. That's something you'll have to decide for yourself when you're older. What about you? Leo asked. Will you ever forgive Mom or Grandpa? Russell looked at his son, seeing the genuine curiosity in his eyes. No, he said simply. Some betrayals can't be forgiven. Leo considered this, then nodded again. Understand. Russell knew his son didn't fully comprehend yet. Couldn't, at his age, but someday he would. Someday Leo would understand that there were lines that, once crossed, could never be uncrossed. That some actions permanently altered the course of relationships, of lives. That Russell's unforgiveness wasn't about holding a grudge. It was about recognizing an immutable truth. Victoria, Henderson, and Bennett had all made their choices. Russell had simply ensured they faced the consequences. A year to the day after Leo's fateful birthday party, Russell received a letter from Bennett, sent through his attorney. The old man was apparently in poor health, the stress of imprisonment taking its toll. He was seeking reconciliation before it was too late, offering what remained of his assets to be placed in a trust for Leo. Russell wrote a brief response. Leo will inherit nothing from you but the truth of your actions. He shared Bennett's letter with Leo, allowing his son to make his own decision about responding. Leo chose to send a simple get-well card with no personal message. It was more than Russell would have done, but he respected his son's choice. Victoria continued her supervised visits, though they grew increasingly infrequent as Leo's activities and interests pulled him in other directions. She had stopped trying to change the arrangement, finally accepting the limitations Russell had established. At Leo's 13th birthday party, a small gathering at their new home with a few close friends, Sam pulled Russell aside. You know, most men would have been destroyed by what happened to you, he said quietly. but you turned it around completely. You beat them at their own game. Russell watched Leo laughing with his friends, healthy and whole despite everything that happened. It wasn't a game to me, Sam. It was survival. Still, you have to admit there's some satisfaction in knowing they all got exactly what they deserved. Russell considered this. Justice isn't about satisfaction. It's about balance. They disrupted the balance. I restored it. Sam chuckled. Always the philosopher. But between us, you're glad Henderson is rotting in prison and Victoria is barely scraping by, aren't you? I'm glad Leo is safe, Russell replied. The rest is collateral damage. But later that night, alone in his study, Russell allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. He looked at a photo of Leo from the days before everything had fallen apart, and next to it, a recent school picture showing a more mature, confident boy emerging from the shadow of family trauma. Russell had never sought revenge for its own sake. What he had sought was justice, protection, and a future for his son untainted by the corruption and betrayal that had threatened to engulf them. He had achieved all three. Victoria, Henderson, and Bennett had failed to understand the most fundamental truth about Russell Donovan. He was not a man who forgave betrayal. Not from his wife. Not from anyone. What they had mistaken for passivity had been patience. What they had interpreted as weakness had been restraint. In the end, they had learned what Russell had known all along. That some men cannot be broken, some betrayals cannot be survived, and some enemies should never be made. Russell closed the photo album and turned out the light. The past was settled. Justice had been served. Now he and Leo could focus on the future, stronger, wiser, and free from the shadows of betrayal. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen, and I'll see you there.